Hey everyone, I'm Alexander De Ritter, co-founder here at inkforall.com, and in this video, I'm going to show you the economic theory of AI in search. So, this theory is going to tell you the future of search, content marketing, the future for brands, and the web as a whole. Do not miss this video. If you do not watch this video, you will not know many very important pieces of information that will be important to you as you are developing strategies for your brand. So let's dive right into it. FOMO apocalypse. ChatGPT comes out, takes the world by storm, and everybody has a fear of missing out, is rushing to put these products in their product and expanding their offering because of the popularity, because it's what people want. Because if you don't have it, people will just switch to a competitor who does have it because it's everybody's favorite new toy. Search is included in that. And so here you see a story of Microsoft having some initial wrinkles with their first version of the model, but it is missing the bigger story. The real headline here is actually in the key points. Microsoft's Bing AI chatbot will be capped at 50 questions per day and 5 question and answers per individual session. Now, what does that have to do with the early wrinkles in the chatbot behaving weird in the first beta version release ever? Nothing. It has nothing to do with it. But it is the main story. The article has the key point and the main story confused, because the main story here is that AI is expensive and Microsoft has to cap its usage. Let's take a look at how expensive it actually is. VentureBeat article showed us that it represents a 10x increase in cost. 10x increase in cost, okay? So if it costs you $1 million, it now costs you $10 million. If it costs you $1 billion, it now costs you $10 billion. 10x is very large. 10x is what makes you more relevant than the competition. It's what makes you an unbelievably profitable company. But if your margins get cut like that, that hurts. It's very important. So the company that ends up winning the AI race is not necessarily the best and biggest model. It is the one that can build a model that is just good enough, that is 10 times more affordable to run. So Google, just like Microsoft, is not employing the most powerful models here. That is something important to note. In fact, Google said that they are using the smallest, lightweight version of LaMDA in their search product. We're going to delve into what that looks like in a moment. But notice and remember, for-profit companies like Google and Microsoft and the free market as a whole reward efficiency. And 10x increase in cost is not efficient. That begs the question, how small of a model are we using that represents 10x increase? And what are the capabilities of that model and shortcomings of it? Let's take a look. In this slide, you can see that Google can only afford the smallest lightweight version of LaMDA. What is that version? It's 2 billion parameters. Compare that to the 8 billion, 32 billion, 128 billion parameter version of the model. Well, you will instantly see that in terms of safety, specificity, and interestingness, the smaller model, the smallest model, does just fine. It does great. But in sensibleness, groundedness, and informativeness, it doesn't do well. It does do well compared to where technology was 5 years ago, but it doesn't do well compared to a human. And that is the standard. That is the benchmark. For example, in terms of interestingness, right? Lambda is outperforming humans. It is possible for an AI model to be really interesting. But that begs the question, where are we weak? Well, we're extremely weak in groundedness. Why? Because the 2 billion parameter model vastly underperforms the 128 billion parameter model, and even that large model vastly underperforms human performance. And that smallest model, 2 billion, represents 10x increase in cost. Running a larger model increases the cost. I'm not going to claim here those costs are raising exponentially or even linearly, but for comparison's sake, a model that is 50 times larger than a 2 billion parameter model might cost 50 times more to run than the 2 billion parameter model, which already increases the cost 10x. We're looking at a potential 500x increase in cost for Google or Microsoft to run a 100 billion parameter model. 500x increase in cost is not economically sustainable. It just isn't. The cost has to come down an order of magnitude of 500 times to make the same profit margins as they do today. And that right there will tell you all you need to know about the future of SEO and search and where this is heading. So, groundedness. Why is it important? Being grounded in the facts, informativeness, knowing more facts, sensibleness, being able to make sense of those facts. Groundedness and informativeness are related directly to the size of the parameter model. You can see these lines are quite aggressively increasing linearly as the model size increases. All right. That is because the larger a parameter model, the more parameters you have, the more uncommon information you can memorize. Right. So a small model, which is the only model that's efficient enough to run while making a 10x increase in cost, is simply not going to be good enough. So we need a solution to solve groundedness and informativeness. And that means that the way Bard and Microsoft's Bing chat are grounding their chatbot, their tiny AI, in facts by doing what? By relying on search results. In other words, chat is powered by search results. In other words, SEO optimization optimizes for chat. And here you can see Microsoft's interface. You can see Prometheus. Microsoft has something called the Bing Orchestrator. And the way they ground their model in information is by basically relying on search indexing, ranking, and answers. They then feed that information into the smallest AI model they can afford and come up with an answer. These search engines have limitations in informativeness, sensibleness, and groundedness, and are trying to overcome it with grounding techniques that are really workarounds. What we're witnessing here is a less than ideal solution because search results are not represented in the same format as the AI models that you're interacting with. It's that simple. It requires an additional layer of interpretation. And that is not the economically most optimized way to do this. So, moving on, we also have what is called the information retrieval spectrum. At least I think that's what it's called. That's why I labeled it this way. This is all pretty new. And what you see is that search exists on a spectrum from knowing exactly what you want to sort of knowing what you want to not knowing what you want at all. The feed is popular. Think of your TikTok feed, your Facebook feed, your product feed, your news app feed. The feed is there to understand what you want before you know to ask it. On the other hand of the spectrum, you have search, when you know exactly the information you're trying to find. You're very precise. You have search queries. When you enter a search query, you expect to find something direct. It is the fastest way. The search interface is the fastest and best way to find what you're looking for if you know what you're looking for. Let me restate that. The search page is the best interface to find quickly what you're looking for if you know what you're looking for. Now, chat is actually a better interface if you're somewhere in between that spectrum of knowing exactly what you want and not knowing what you want. Chat allows you to explore and dig into information at a deeper level and engage with it. So, examples of that is best vehicle for single moms with a part-time job driving Uber, or finding an event hosting place in Waco, Texas that can fit 100 people. So this is similar to what you would think about in search intent already. When you do SEO content creation, you try to determine a search intent for your keyword. And some queries will have an image intent, others will have a news intent, others will have a shopping intent, others will have an information intent. So this is already a concept SEOs are very familiar with, right? So what we're adding here is basically yet another type of intent, right? The intent of I kind of sort of know what I want. Well, those queries will be answered by chat. But the questions that are more direct in knowing exactly what you want, those will be continued to be answered with search. And if you go to Google to the news page, you get a feed where Google tries to predict based on your interest what news would be relevant to you. So you see, the Google search engine already operates on a spectrum. It already operates on a user intent. So for each query, the search engine must predict the user query method intent. And that means that it needs to figure out what kind of search result is most relevant, whether that is an image page or a chat page or a regular search result page. But what is important to note here is that regular search is not going away. It lives on a spectrum, and it depends really on the query type that the users are inserting. Okay, so we have a bit more reassurance here for SEOs who are wondering, how is chat and AI going to affect the future? Okay, so search is not going away. But on the other hand, we do have chat who's going to start occupying that sort of know what I want middle territory between search and feeds. And that spectrum, that middle spectrum right there, we are dealing with the economic theory of AI for search, because that spectrum right there will be served by AI models that are the tiniest, smallest versions possible. And that right there has a problem of groundedness, sensibleness, groundedness, informativeness, unless it can then tap into the search results themselves. And then that means that chat itself is powered by search results, which we know how to optimize for. That is kind of where we are today. So if we look at the next slide, you're going to see that today, right? Let's put this out of the way. Today, you may ask it, create marketing copy, how to solve this code problem, answer this medical question. These are things that you may ask Google Bard or the Bing search chat. Now, most companies right now simply run that query through a big model, perhaps with a groundedness information retrieval system like Prometheus, but there's basically only one model. And when I say a large, dense model, I'm saying a 2 billion parameter model is large and dense. Those are expensive and massive. And it needs to know everything about everything, so it requires to be augmented with a groundedness level. But today, this is how it works. Now, this is not the ideal way. And I'll give you a simple example. There are versions of GPT and these large language models that today have been fine-tuned and trained to pass a medical exam, for example, or to answer legal questions, for example, or to be trained on coding questions, for example. Perhaps you can even go more narrow, just JavaScript. See, the more specific your model is, the more room there is in the parameters to know everything about that one topic. And so your 2 billion parameters, right, if they have to fit the whole world's information, they're not going to make a lot of sense. They're not going to be very grounded. But if you can use 2 billion parameters exclusively for one specific narrow set of knowledge, like JavaScript, you can fit a whole lot of information and training in these parameters. You can get a really high performing model that is just fine tuned on that and not the general information, right? So, what does that mean? It means that the next generation of search will really be about, call it a middle layer that is going to interpret who to ask. And think about it in real human terms is you have a friend who's good at computers, a friend who's good at, I don't know, nutrition, a friend who's good at construction and contracting, a friend that knows everything about real estate. It's kind of like that, right? So humans, we have only this much capacity to know stuff, and we can't be an expert at everything. So what do we do when we have some question? Well, we go and ask a friend who knows everything about that topic, somebody you trust. Well, it's the same concept here, right? In order to get the cost down, we need to move from the today model basically to the tomorrow model, which is a large specialized knowledge model in different domain, but basically a control mechanism here will switch between the models and find the models that know the information at the lowest possible cost. The only way to get there is by making many small models. So right there, I have to just, pop the balloon, change your perception of reality here. The future is not some giant artificial intelligence Skynet that runs in a massive data center at Google headquarters. Sure, that may exist, but it will not power your search. I'm sorry to tell you, it will not, because of the economic theory of AI in search. It is simply too expensive to make that large model accessible to all human beings all the time. It is too expensive and almost impossible to keep that model up to date with all knowledge in humanity. So you have to distribute the knowledge in small nodes that are hyper efficient and small but extremely specialized. The small models that are specialized will outperform the large models in terms of what really matters: economy. So a 2 billion parameter model just about JavaScript can outperform a 200 billion parameter model that is trained on, general information because of how much knowledge it can allocate to that specific knowledge set. So that means that the future is really more around large specialized knowledge models in different domains. It could actually be thousands. It could actually be millions. It could be infinite. But initially, and that's why I say tomorrow, the first place you will see this is in specific areas of knowledge that there are also large players that have unique data that, for example, are going to train how to answer certain search intents, like medical questions, right? So that is the next thing you're going to see happen. Now, just moving on from there, just to show you how sure I am all this is going to happen, Google released a paper called Introducing Pathways Next Generation AI Architecture. And this is what I'm talking about. This graphic here comes from their blog. This is exactly what we're talking about. You are talking to different specialized nodes and gathering information from multiple parts of them until you come with an answer. A more recent example of this includes something called switch prompt. And I put the article link there. Switch prompt is essentially a similar concept. But instead of asking the big model everything, you switch the prompt over to ask another type of model for something. And now I want to pause here for a moment and just talk about Stability AI. So Stability AI is a company that does AI research and makes open source stable diffusion AI image generation models available. Open source. So everybody can access it, download the models, play with it, tinker it, expand it, everything. That makes it a very interesting company. And their model 1.5 is still stable diffusion 1.5 is still considered one of the most popular models because out of the box, it is trained on a lot of data. But then they started running into fundraising and some legal questions and objections. And artists started objecting and say, hey, how about this? How about my art? It shouldn't be in there. And so then they did this for their version 2.0. They released it with training on a lot less specialized artists. So they kind of got out of the hot legal waters with their 2.0 model. So the average person, right, that would go and use these models might be underwhelmed by 2.0, even though it's technically superior to 1.5, just because it wasn't trained on all these specialized data sources. Because you cannot forget, specialized data sources also hold copyrights laws and are subject to copyright laws and hold copyright to their information. You can't just even train a large model on all the data out there. That means you need to rely on specialized training models. And so if, for example, Disney wanted to create a licensed version of creating Disney style art on their corpus of data, they can now do that with Stable Diffusion 2.0 and have all the innovations of the technology in 2.0 versus 1.5, benefit from that, but train a specialized model on it. And if you go look in AI, in the AI world, there's a site called Hugging Face that shows you all the models that people are making. You actually will notice an explosion of highly specialized image generation models built on 2.0. Some will be about cartoonifying yourself. Some will be about making like The Simpsons. Some will be about making Pokemons and so forth and so on. So what you're noticing is that the general big model 2.0 or 2.1 is not that good. It can't be as good as the individual specialized model that makes Pokemon, for example. But then the Pokemon model will absolutely be horrific at making photography image. It will turn everything into a Pokemon, right? So you're already seeing that happen today. But the only way you can really unlock that future is if you have a truly open source large language model, or as we will see in 2023, a large open source multimodal foundation model. And it's then we are going to see the true power unleashed of what is the future. And the future is smaller models that are hyper trained on specific entities of knowledge in the global knowledge tree, like specialists. And the way of the future, the way that information will be accessed is by, you can imagine, a switch prompt or a pathway that understands and knows who to ask the question to. So when we are looking at my next slide here, this is the future. Sure, the large general model will still be there as a fallback. You'll also have the very large specialized models that are hard to compete with, that are hyper trained on medical exams or hyper trained on legal questions. But then there is everything else. There's your brand.com model. There's a model that knows everything about the author. There's a model about from the fan club, from a forum, for user generated content that is specialized in that specific style and voice and tone, and is specialized in that specific information. We're saying ultra specialized models with narrow niche, high authority topical focus. Now, when you interface with the future of search engines, you're interfacing with this. And this middle management is then deciding which specialized model to tap into. Now, we have an analogy for that. It's called the World Wide Web. And what did the World Wide Web look like before the browser? It was bad, it was not as useful. What did the World Wide Web look like before the search engine? It was bad. Directories, not so useful. So I predict that somebody will come up with the equivalent of this. You can imagine your future website will not just have an interface like you know it today, but it will also have its own specialized AI model that knows everything about it. And just like Google has tried and failed to host every website with AMP, it will also try and might try. Hopefully, it will not try. But if it does try, it will fail at trying to host every model in the world on its own servers. So the future of search is really one where you, as an author, as an individual, as a brand, as a fan club, as a forum, as a website, you own your own information. So a good example would be, let's say you are a car manufacturer and somebody has a question about that car. The search engine today has to determine who is most authoritative and most trustworthy to answer that question. It then will show a top 10 results and perhaps show your site, car manufacturer, having the best and most reliable information. It will choose that you're the most relevant source and therefore rank you number one. Well, the same principle applies if the search engine of the future, the AI chat conversation, decides that your AI is the most trustworthy, relevant, up to date model to answer that question, then it will interface with you in the same way that it might, you imagine a hyperlink works to a website today. It might link to your site where they can interface with the AI, or it can directly integrate with that AI. And you will be able to control that model with your information and make a difference. So the future of SEO for AI is that model optimization will be the new website optimization. And it is a form of SEO. You will need SEOs to help you optimize what information goes into that AI model. As a brand or individual, you will not be able to compete for generic models. You will need to make models that are topically authoritative and specialized in a corpus of your choosing, in a niche or sub-niche of your choosing, that outperforms the general model if you want to have a chance of being integrated in this architecture. And at the core of this model is information. You also need to ensure your client's model will be better than other models available. Just like SEOs today, you need to make sure their website is more optimized than other websites. And you will do that and achieve that by building trust, authority, and optimizing the quality of the model. So, this now is also where I want to add a tiny appendix comment. We have heard a lot about Web 3.0, non fungible tokens, crypto, blockchain, all of that, buzzwords. Until now, they haven't really, especially Web 3.0, they haven't really lived up to the mainstream promise that everybody wanted it to be, right? I think that's a fair statement, whether you are, wherever you fall on that, you know, spectrum of opinions. But what I believe is that at this stage in the economy of AI, in search and in the web, I believe at this stage, it is finally going to come in its own. I actually believe that Web 3.0, decentralization and distribution, no central point, this would be an ideal architecture to build this future on, of a distributed AI world, because these models can be large to host. And if you distribute them, you can have that decentralized benefit. And so the future, again, is not some Skynet supercomputer server somewhere sitting that knows everything. Instead, it's more like an ant colony or an ant super colony where knowledge and intelligence is actually distributed across a decentralized network. And so you do not have a single ant that knows everything, but instead it is a network. Just like humanity, you do not have a single individual that knows everything. You have a network. And so the future of intelligence, that future Skynet, is less of a single building that you try to say, hey, that if I destroy that server. No, it's more intelligence that is decentralized, that includes a lot of different specialized smaller agents that are perhaps distributed themselves across the network. So there you go. This is the future of search based on economic theory. And this will happen and unfold in this way because large open source models will become available. And even the best and smartest and richest company in the world who train the biggest models can't afford to even run them at scale. There you have it, the economic theory of AI and how it will impact search in the future of the web, and why I believe this will happen this way. So if you like this video, please subscribe because that will motivate me to make more videos just like this. At Ink4All.com, we're preparing for this future by helping you stand out from the noise. We have a really compelling product in the AI field. I've been working in the AI field for a long time in marketing field. So you could say, have a bit of authority to know what I'm talking about in here. But if you would love to get more of these videos, please follow and also check out Ink4All.com if you haven't already. Have a nice day.